Today we're going to draw with Caliart markers, and we're still going to make some sick art. So if you've seen my previous video where I did the 10 minute, 1 minute, and 10-second challenge, I am drawing my original main character from my webcomic. This is the reference photo of the character design that I will be basing the drawing off of. So I will use these markers in action, but not going to lie, I actually like these markers. Sure, sometimes the cap does not match the ink colors, and at the time of filming, they didn't offer refills. I still think they don't. But if you're trying to get started on trying out alcohol markers as a medium, the 51 pack is more than enough, and that's the exact pack I have here with me. Obviously, first material up are these markers. For paper, I usually use the Leader brand manga paper, which shades alcohol markers superbly. When selecting paper, you mainly need to look at the thickness of the paper to see if it can handle a lot of ink, since markers tend to bleed. Obviously, do your research, and it's good practice to test any papers with the markers you're curious about using. And for this video, I am using a gridded field notes notebook, which can handle markers surprisingly well for sketching. Obviously, when you do professional marker work, I would recommend the Leader brand or comic book board. For pencil, I am using the Pilot Color Eno 0.7 pencil in blue. And finally, the Uni Pin Fine Line for the inking pen. Some people use thicker brush pen, some people use thinner pen, that is up to you. So for this drawing here, I'm gonna spoil it because it was in my previous video. I did time myself to work on this for an hour, hence the phone timer. Notifications kept going off during the videos, and I forgot to silence it, so anyways. So voila! We get our field note notebook here, or with a pencil sketch. I'll speed up this part since it's very hard to see the blue pencil lines on the screen. But yes, step 1, underlying sketch. And once that sketch is completed and up to your liking, then we start with inking. So for this drawing, I'm using a much thinner pen. And when you outline and put pressure, there's no variety in the line. So after the first line, which is a solid same size line, I try to add variety to the brushstroke by going over some of the lines again. So some parts would be thicker than other parts of the line, if that makes sense. So for example, if I wanted to imply shadow or an area with more weight, I would go over it and add more thickness to the line. And where the subject feels lighter, then I use the pen tip to kiss the paper. But yeah, as you can see, I am carefully going over my sketch layer. You can use whiteout to correct any mistakes, but because this is a field notebook, I did not want to use too much material on the page. When I do normal sketches, I'm generally faster, but because the line art will obviously show underneath the markers, I try to be as precise and as close to my vision as possible. Yeah, I will speed up this portion since I am going to continue adding line art and adding line weight to any line I choose. According to the timestamp on my notebook that I marked, sketching and line art took me 15 minutes altogether. Inking is my second favorite stage of marker drawing. My favorite part of the marker process is coloring. When you color, you can color any order you want, but personally, I like to start with the skin tone because that will set the stage and the color theme to the rest of the drawing. At this point, I already have a general idea of what I want the marker drawing to look like, but doing the first layer of the skin tone makes it feel more finalized. And so in order for me to build up to coloring the rest of the drawing, I do like to start with a very light skin-based tone. For the sake of this tutorial, and if you are following along with a Caliart marker, I am using the color WG00, which is a warm grade 0. I know it's a very unusual color to start inking with, but I try to start with an extremely light base color. The same can apply for the really light skin tone equivalent to Ohuhu and Copics markers. So you can see I'm adding the base color. I'm not doing a completely solid layer of color. I try to leave parts of white in the highlight area, so like the cheekbone, the nose bridge, the arm. I've already kind of decided where the light source is, and in this case, it is above her head, kind of leaning to the right side. I'll draw it in on the video here. But yeah, I start with a very, very pale wash of the base skin tone. Before you use the marker on your final drawing, I always be sure to test the marker colors just in case it ends up too light or too dark to your vision. Because once the marker makes its mark on the paper, it is possible to lighten it by using the colorless blender, but it bothers me if I were to notice a mark of a color I did not mean to put on. So yeah, always do your due diligence, test the marker colors before putting it on paper. Sometimes I move on to adding a base color to another part of the drawing, or I build up on the skin tone. For this video, I guess my ADHD kicked in and I started coloring the eyes. For the base color of the eye, I am using a Y543 in raw umber, and started adding base colors to her blue shirt. And for the blue base, I am using B203 in pastel blue. For the red hoodie, the base color is R301 in blush. So yeah, I'm going around each element of the subject matter and adding a very light wash of base color. If you add a lighter color first, you can always build up upon it, where if you start with a dark color, it is a lot harder to add more shading. There are also parts of this coloring phase where I am redrawing my line art. Sometimes I don't notice things I want to fix until, I've stirred up the drawing enough. So that's why you see me going back in a pen. And yeah, as you can see here, I'm testing the greens before I make a mark. For the green bow, I went with G503 in pale green. So for the hair here, I am going in Y701 in salmon pink. I think this seems like an unusual color for how brown the base color is. It's a good time for me to reiterate to always test your colors before you put it on the paper. Most Copic markers are a bit more accurate, with the cap colors matching the ink color. I've not had any personal experience with Ohuhu markers, but for Caliart especially, sometimes the cap of the marker will not match the ink. So for example, if you grab like this light purple, it seems darker than it actually is. So always be sure to double check colors before you commit to adding it to your drawing, which is why I also like to reiterate, always start with a lighter base color. So anyways, I'm doing the same technique as before. I'm leaving white in areas where I want to add highlight, but otherwise I'm just going over the subject with a solid color. Base color is complete. I am going back in with more inking just to make sure the lines are okay and to my liking. According to the time, this took around 12 minutes. Obviously, take your time, but just wanted to show the passage of time when I drew this. So when adding your next shadow layer for skin, always try to go as light and as close to the base color as possible. If you commit to a very dark color, you can't undo it. It is very difficult to lighten the color. So for the second shadow or base shadow, I used R000 in skin white. So I'm lightly adding shadows underneath the hair, and then I add a little bit on her cheeks, and then I did go a little more harder on the hand behind her hair. Obviously that's going to be a heavy shadow layer, but in parts like the face where you want to be extremely careful where to place your shadows, kind of want to tread very lightly. Less is better than more, and very easy to overdo it. Coloring is a lot of fun, not going to lie there. But when you use markers, you always want to slowly build up to your final colors. So even if you feel something is too little, you can always add more. It's much easier to add than subtract colors. And sometimes with alcohol markers, the first layer may turn out wet, so it seems a lot darker. So sometimes you may need to wait a couple minutes before the marker dries on your paper. You may need to spend some time practicing in that front. So for the second shadow layer, I'm going in with the R301 in blush. with a 51 color marker set. It's okay to reuse some colors that you've used previously. I mean, this is the same color that I used for the sweater. That sweater layer is not going to be the same. You also want to keep in mind how the colors react to the previous layer. So you can see the blush color on the skin looks different than the blush layer on the sweater, even though they are the same color. So I'm going on my shading layer for the sweater in R502 in medium pink. So there's the shadow layer. Okay, so this is the part where it seemed unusual. This is a technique that I took from looking at a lot of Copic drawing drawn by professional manga artists like Ichiro Oda that did One Piece, and Murata that did Ice Shield 21, and even Bleach by Kubo Taite. But they like to go over their shadow layers with a very light purple. If I just kept building on with, let's say, light red, and I kept building on with darker and darker red, the shadow does not feel as dimensional. And so I'm gonna go over the shadow layers with R703 and Pastel Violet. And make sure the purple is very light. If you go too dark purple, then it's gonna be obviously purple. And then I will go over the purple layer again with the same light pink as previously. And as you can see, the purple is blending very, very well with the new layer. Oh yeah, try to go over the next layer when the purple layer is still slightly wet. You'll notice when the paper is a little bit shining after you put in your marker. And so when I go over it again with the same shade of red as before, it blends in beautifully. So now it's giving this very light pastel-y look, which I really like in marker drawing, personally. And so in short, this is just a lot of layering of purple, lighter shadow layer. So just go back and forth. Even the blue here, I'm using the exact same purple as before, R703, and then I'm gonna go over it again with the previous blue layer in B203 in pastel blue. And then the same can be done for the skin, obviously with the skin, because it is a lot lighter, and obviously skin's not purple. Just try to not overdo it on the skin. So when I initially lay down the purple, it does look very extreme and dark, but obviously I'm going to blend it in with the previous shadow layer, so yeah, like it's a lot easier to build up. If you're really unsure, maybe just do like one part of the drawing in purple, and then like just do one section at a time. Obviously, I've had a lot of practice, so I was able to identify which parts I wanted to shade. And yeah, repeat as so on the hair. Hair is kind of a little trickier. I did use the purple, but I also did use a little bit of pale pink. I believe this was the pink here is the R502 in medium pink. Yeah, just slowly build up, blend, build up, blend, layer, layer. There's always a lot of different ways to color in marker. This is obviously not the only way I've done this, but I think I was feeling pastel-y. I'll probably share more techniques I've learned over the years in a later video. But yeah, and if a color doesn't feel right, always just try to re-blend it in with the previous color you've used. Sometimes people like the blocky look where colors are very separated. That's okay, but for this particular image, I wanted that really light blended look. Yeah, lots of purple, lots of layering, adding more shadows, and places I've realized should have shadow. Then I'm going over some parts of the line art again, because now with colors you can see which parts of the line art needs more shading and which parts of the line art can be left as is. Markers don't blend away your line art. Just with the colors, your line art may seem a lot than it was when it wasn't colored in. Yeah, back and forth, back and forth. So that whole coloring after the base layer took 20 minutes. To make the drawing more dimensional, you don't want every shadow layer to be the exact same. Obviously some parts of the hair is darker than other parts of the hair, so try to add some diversity in the shadow layer, especially when these areas, like the hair and the sweater, is very large. So yeah, if I were to summarize, my entire process is adding diversity in both line art, line weight, and coloring with shadows. So in this particular drawing, I did not really have a background in mind. After all, I was only limited to an hour. But since I had some time left after coloring the character, I decided just to add that really nice subtle gray layer in the background. You could see the way I'm holding the brush tip, I'm able to feather out the line. It's not a solid line. That's a really good technique when you want to add some fades or want to blend. But in this case, yeah, I'm having the color gray fade into the white. I'm not going too overboard just because A, there's not enough time, but also I didn't want too dramatic of a background. I even added a darker gray for the shadow and blending it in with the lighter gray just so it's not extremely blocky. But yeah, as you can see, my markers performed very well on a field notebook. I know some people do not like the grid, but because I spend a lot of time sketching, I don't mind the grid lines at all. And the drawing's complete! Any art is possible as long as you are willing to create. And as always, thank you so much for watching my video. I hope to see you in the next one and wishing you all a absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye!